It all started a few weeks ago when I took part in a national TV quiz show, Don't Ask Me Why, and went all the levels up there to become runner-up. Apart from some money, what I also gained is popularity ever since I've been greeted by strangers more or less everywhere. Yesterday in the afternoon I went to a local cafe where we've set up a catch-up with an old friend. I called in earlier, sat at my favorite table in the corner, asked for my favorite double espresso, grabbed a newspaper from the rack and started turning pages. I didn't have time to read anything worthy, however, as a minute later Angela, the waitress who brought my coffee, turned to the front door with a quiet wow. I looked there too, and saw a very tall guy at the entrance. He was wearing sport clothes and was, I guess, the tallest human being I had ever seen. He proceeded to the bar, which top didn't even come up to his crouch. Being a regular here, I knew perfectly well that that very bar was at the level of my upper chest, and, standing 5'7", I'm more or less of the average height. Well, I thought, it may be your chance, Angela, you may wish to try it on. As if hearing me, she returned to behind the bar and asked the guy how can she help him. He didn't seem to notice, however, looked like he was waiting for something. Angela started rubbing the bar top with a piece of cloth, ever so slowly moving closer and closer to the towering customer. A couple of minutes later her hopes shattered with appearance of a pretty blonde at the door. Or shall I say above instead of at? She had to stoop to enter the cafe and straightened once inside. The girl was about 20 years old, rather thin, with splendid hair the color of honey, wearing a black shirt, a long black skirt and flat black shoes. When she stood upright, her chin rose as high as the crossbar of the entry door. Surely enough, this old cafe featured rather low ceiling and door frames, but not as low. I never liked them really tall, but couldn't help it, my jaw dropped in a very natural way. I managed to fix it, but it dropped again once the girl approached the guy who's still standing at the bar. It was impossible, but, comparing to her, he looked not that tall at all. She was perhaps 6 inches taller. I don't know how many seconds or minutes I was sitting there with the cooling down coffee in my cup before my mobile woke me up. The friend I was about to see said she wouldn't be able to make it today due to some family emergency. To me it meant a lone night, one of many, so I sighed and carried on watching the odd couple at the bar, having nothing else to do. I pulled out a cigarette from the pack and the lighter, only to find out that it'd run out of fuel. Just another disappointment, I stood up and came to the bar to borrow a lighter from Angela. The giants were drinking cocktails, but as I came closer the girl pushed her boyfriend and said, "Look at that guy." Then she turned to me, bent down and asked, "Are you the guy from the telly?" "I am indeed," I replied, looking for the waitress. "Wow, it's cool," she said. "I'm Katie, this is Paul, and you're?" "Nick." "Sure, now I remember, Nick. Well, you're famous now, aren't you?" Katie turned to Paul and claimed, "I always wanted to have a TV star as a friend." "But," she added, turning back to me, "I thought you were a bit taller." "You always imagine people taller than they are," said Paul, smiling. "But they never turn out to be taller than yourself, do they?" "Stop teasing me." "He calls me giantess and makes laugh on me," complained she to me, as if I were bothered. Well, maybe I was a little, since she was somewhat attractive, albeit much too tall. So I just made a universally face expression and tapped the bar in order to grab the Angela's attention. I was craving. "How tall are you anyway?" This Katie just can't stop talking, can she? "Okay, I know what's gonna follow," suddenly said Paul, rising on his tiptoes and kissing Katie's cheek. "I gotta go." "See you," she waved him briefly and added, "Paul always has a job to do." "You know, I'm so glad to have met you, Nick. You were really cool on the show. It's a shame that old bitch won at last." "You're too generous," I looked up to thank her. Now that she was alone, I allowed myself to have a closer look at Katie the giantess, and admitted to myself that from this distance and this very unusual angle she looked even prettier than before. "By the way, I have a couple of guests tonight," she went on, "and I bet they will be happy to meet you too." And one more thing. Don't take my relationship with Paul in the wrong way. He's just my friend. I like him, but rather like I would like a female friend. He's gay, you know. Pretty or not, she did talk too much, but despite the fact I kind of liked her, which was pretty off in itself. She was definitely a very open person and a beautiful girl. The only thing I didn't like at all was her height, and, unlike talking, there was nothing she could do about it. I don't know where the top of my head came up to her body, but my eyes were not higher than her nipples. I had never talked to anybody this tall before and felt a little weird. Well, not a little, to say the truth. Besides, it wasn't too convenient to have a conversation the way we did. I had to painfully tilt my neck while she was forced to fold in her waist. But Katie didn't seem to mind the pose. "Are you in for the evening, Nick?" I thought a little. All right, she may not be Y type, but there must be some other girls on the party, right? I'm free. I have nothing to do tonight. I am intrigued by this girl. Okay, her tallness is a setback, but otherwise she's nice, and pretty, and talkative, and... So, I said yes. "Wonderful," she exclaimed. "Got a pen?" She scribbled an address on the napkin and a big 6 p.m. sharp below. "I see you there, Nick, and now I, too, have to go." She bent a little lower, pecked me in the cheek, and stormed out. I rubbed my face, trying to understand what it all was, and finally grabbed the lighter from Angela's hand. She stood there looking as stunned as I felt at the moment. "Did he really have to be gay?" she asked me. I didn't say anything, was busy with the first puff. The bell on the front door rang. It was, again, the tall Katie. "My meeting has just been cancelled," she explained, "so I came back to make sure you don't run away, scared by the pushy giantess. I'm ready to go when you are." Her flat was only few quarters away, and the walk was pleasant and disturbing at the same time. The good thing was once we left the cafe she declared, "Now, I'm next to a famous person." Let them envy and embrace my shoulder with her left arm. I immediately laid my hand on her waist, and it was very unusual and very exciting to feel her left breast occasionally touching my face and sense her hip softly rubbing against my right shoulder. On the other hand, people stared at us astonishingly, and I couldn't blame them. I just wasn't prepared for this kind of attention. Noticing my constraint, Katie said, "Relax, Nick, they stare at me, not at you. I'm kinda used to it. You know, people are always eager to know how tall I am. Some brave ones try to come closer to compare their heights with mine and even ask me directly how tall I am. I'm really surprised you haven't asked the question thus far. You don't like being seen with a tall girl, do you?" This was not an easy one to answer, so I took her back to the previous topic. "And how do you react when they ask you?" "Well, I've nothing to hide. I say I'm 7 feet exactly, and if they ask then whether I play basketball, I say I do sports, but not basketball. Mine is volleyball, because..." She kept talking, but didn't hear her explanations. 7 feet sharp. I was in shock. The tallest person I've met before was my classmate and neighbor who was 6 feet 5, and I've always felt a dwarf next to him.